Hi everyone, I'm Rob Hawks.
I'm Chris Blackburn.
And as you know, we run Training Tuesdays every week, 4:30. At the moment though, with the coronavirus pandemic hitting the country and the world, we're going to be running Training Tuesdays remotely. Isn't that right, Chris?
That's correct. So everybody stay safe. We will still be ensuring that the training happens on a weekly basis, but we will be working remotely through that process too.
Excellent. Thank you.
There we go. All right. Well, guys, it's Training Tuesdays. It is Tuesday, the 19th of May, 2020, and we are talking rapport building. We are going to be diving deeper into the land of rapport building and big picture questions. Last week, we broke the mold and we changed the order for those eagle-eyed viewers of ours. Chris, how you doing, mate? It's getting a little bit closer to when we can come in the office, which I know you're excited about. So how are you doing? You just moved recently, right? So how are you enjoying the new place?
New place. It's great, but I'm so looking forward to getting back in the office. The opportunity for me and yourself to run this session, hopefully in the office next week, could be a reality. Maybe we should share a beer or something together as we run that session potentially. We'll see how we.
Chris, how you doing, mate? I might have to put some trousers on for that. Of course, I always wear pants.
But no, it's been a very productive day today. I had some great sessions and ready for this, ready to jump in. I thought last week there's been some great feedback that's come through, so it's about continuing that on now. And after we've broke the mold, what do we do? You know, after we've done something out of the norm, what's the next step in building rapport? And today we're going to be covering that.
That's it. I just want to say hello to the guys on Facebook. We've got David Cusack, Matthew Young, Frankie, how are you? Michael Hill, Jesse Murphy. Don't focus on one thing, he says, to help me on that. And Alison Cause, Craig McLennan, welcome on board to Training Tuesday. So last week we covered, I've got my notifications on, isn't that terrible? Okay, last week we covered the first stage of building rapport. Can anyone remember what that was in the chat? What did we cover? I've already mentioned it once, so let's see if you've been paying attention. What was the first stage? This could backfire terribly if no one writes in the chat.
If they don't, I will.
Yeah, that's it. At least I've got someone to answer. What did we cover last week for those? Sorry,
I wasn't here. That's all good.
All right. Chris, fill in the blanks then. What did we cover last week?
So last week we covered breaking the mold. So how we sort of summarize that is to stand out from the crowd and really, I guess, don't be that person, what people are expecting you to do. You know, as salespeople, we need to show that we're not just in it for one sale. You know, so it's really asking yourselves to summarize that, I guess, effectively is, have you ever received it or done that before? And if that doesn't make sense, then just as an example, one of the big feedbacks that me and Rob's been receiving over the last week is just the personalized voice message. As simple as that sounds, on LinkedIn, on social media, on Facebook, we've got a 14-day challenge happening at the moment. There's 700 plus people in that group. There is an opportunity inside there to connect with somebody else who you can potentially help and just send them a voice message, because I can't remember the last time I received one on social media of somebody just messaging me out of the blue, very personable, and it goes against the grain, right, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. Just what Alex says there, do something the opposite to what the customer would expect you to do. I think just having that as a general rule of thumb, doing the opposite, and I think that will help in breaking the mold, doing something different. So if you missed last week's session, I believe it's still running on Facebook. For those of you who are in our academy, you can jump on. Don't forget, you can actually download the audio so you can listen to this while you're driving. Restrictions are lifting at the moment, so we can get out and about now. So if you want to listen to me and Chris, please feel free to download that audio if you're in the academy.
But just two things in the chat. One for Alex. So do the opposite. I couldn't agree with you more. You've been a part of our training for a few months now as well. Why is that important? Why is it doing something opposite to what the customer expects? Why is that so powerful? And Christine, didn't know you could voice message on Facebook. Just send one to me. Connect, send me a voice message, and it'll work a treat.
Yeah, you just hold down the button, and it should let you. There'll be a little speaker button, and you can hold it down. You can always do a video as well. I like videos because you get to see the person too. But yeah, definitely, just helps build a relationship. Like if I can see you or hear you, you can add tone to the interaction, which means that you've got more chance to understand the meaning behind what the words were. I don't know if you've ever read a text and depending on how you're feeling that day, it will determine how you receive the information. So
I certainly do. When my partner Ellie says, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm working." What do you mean? She's generally just asking, "What am I up to?" So the message can come across very, very different through text.
One of my favourite lines.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for Alex to reply, let's dive into what we're going to cover this week. So this Tuesday, we're going to be covering big picture questions. We're going to be looking at why they're important, when and how to use them, and then some specific examples of big picture questions. It's a very interactive session today as well, as you know. So the more that you guys interact with us on Facebook and in Zoom, then the more that we will respond to it. The more that we'll be able to give relative content to your industry. So
just to kick off the interactive nature, really quick why in the chat. Has everybody got a pen, paper, water at the ready? And we are good to go.
I've got a...
Sharon's ready. Shay's ready. Chris is ready. Tom Gorman's ready. Alex is ready. I think there's enough ready. Let's get going, Mr. Hawks.
All right. Okay. Frankie's ready on Facebook too. All right. Awesome. So the first thing I want you to write down is a quote. And I've said this a couple of times, but the quote is that no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. The understanding is that when building relationship and rapport with people, it's key to be understanding them. So you want to really truly understand who they are. So I guess big picture questions is based around a framework of to really truly understand who are you dealing with. Like if you can understand who the individual is, and I guess the primary goal of building rapport is to develop that likability. We all know that Zig Ziglar quote around, if people like you, they'll listen. If they trust you, you'll do business. So what we're going to cover today is talking around how to open people up through these big picture ideas early on in an interaction to start to gauge an understanding of character. So if we can understand the character behind the individual that we're talking to, will be much better to be able to personalize our presentation later on, whether that be on the phone call, on a further appointment, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's really what we want to determine today, is find out as much as you can about the individual so that it shows that you genuinely do care about that person, because before that, they're not really going to want to know much about you. I mean, the chances are, if you're dealing with warm leads, maybe they've already done some research and know about you anyway. We've got some level of personal profile on LinkedIn and Facebook and whatnot. So don't start with yourself. Start with them and find out if that makes sense. So
I think even on the warm lead, I think a lot of businesses now deal with digital marketing, social media. So there is a lot of interest that naturally comes online, and I still think it's paramount to build it really on. I don't know your point on that, Rob, as well, in your opinion. But for me, I just want to be asking big picture questions as early as I possibly can in the piece. So I think as a practical sort of takeaway, have a look at your sales process, your framework, your scripting, whatever you use to introduce yourself to a customer, and have a look how early on you're asking questions. We'll run into them of, what made you pop your details in? What was it about our business that interested you? What is it mainly you're looking for? Things like that have really no specific framework around the answer, because I'm sure if I asked Sharon, Steph, who's with Sharon as well, Karen, Rod, if I asked you a question of what do you like, there's a likelihood we're going to get very different answers. So I think to underpin the big picture questions is not really having a guidance towards what the answer is going to be, as crazy as that sounds. Now, that's not going to lose control in the conversation, but as Rob shared there, it's going to allow you framework not to just understand the customer, but also the way that the conversation is going to go forward for you and for the customer as well. So really take a look at your existing sales process and have a look at how early on you sort of get that in there.
Yeah, I mean, and not diving directly into specific questions, which we'll cover in future sessions, which really get to the nuts and bolts. I mean, you'll know very quickly upon asking a big picture question the type of the behavior style of the individual that you're dealing with, because it's just an opportunity to get them to start talking about themselves. I mean, people love talking about themselves, right? So the more that you can allow the other individual to share about them, gets them talking, gets them interacting. There's nothing worse than being in an interaction, whether it be socially or professionally, where the other person isn't saying anything, where you're purely just sat there. And that's why I was having a coaching session earlier today, talking around about the conscious awareness of these type of rapport building skills. So if you've never been taught how to build rapport and you feel that you don't do it naturally, then this is a really effective way to be able to get somebody talking about themselves, even somebody who's maybe quite switched off. You know, if you're in a social setting and you don't really know the person, or again, it's a professional setting and a networking event, or again, a lead that's popped their details in, because you want to show that you want to do everything in your power to help this person, professional, or in a personal setting, it's more so just around creating conversation, which actually some people do really struggle with. I don't know if you're in the chat, if you want to write whether you struggle with it or not. I'd like to gauge actually inside of this, who finds having that conversation quite easy, and maybe who doesn't. So maybe if you just write, yes, I find it easy, or no, I don't, just as an interaction, I wouldn't mind knowing who finds it difficult and who doesn't.
But I think as well, Rob, if you agree, it sort of allows the framework to ask other questions too, right? We coach a lot around primary, secondary, tertiary level questions to really understand the why. And if anybody's wanting a book, Simon Sinek's Start With Why would be a great piece of literature to either listen or read after this session, because it ties in perfectly. To really understand the why of the customer, we've got to start with that big picture question to be able to then build rapport naturally with the client.
Yeah.
I mean, while people are on the chat, obviously, Rob, if you want to have a bit of a reference to a few of them now that's coming through.
Oh yeah, I just like it. Jared's one had a haircut this morning and getting the new guy to talk. I love the hairdressing. I share a lot with mine. Ayumi, she's probably known more about me than most people, but I think difficult. If you're finding it difficult to get somebody to open up, use reciprocity-based questions. One of my favorite tools, which is answering your own question before you ask it. So, as an example, I've been on the Gold Coast for 5 years. How long have you been here? I originally grew up in Portsmouth in the UK. Where are you from? I've got 2 kids. How many children do you have? From a sales perspective, it could be, I came through the ISR training in 2014. I did a 3-day boot camp. What personal development have you done? So you almost feel that social obligation to answer the question. I'll go back through, Chris, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to run through. So the real underpinning of the rapport build, again, for people taking the notes today, is down the framework of our 10-step process, the negotiation ladder. The goal is to gather intelligence while building rapport. So as we're going down the line of sale, that's what we want to be doing through the whole time. So as we're gathering more intelligence, we're naturally building rapport with a client. And then, like I say, it just allows you to sort of dig deep into, asking questions a lot quicker to really understand the customer's, situation and what they're looking to achieve, for sure. And then I think from a talk time perspective, a lot of people I coach, Rob, as well, may say, if I ask a big picture question to a client, there's a likelihood that they're going to run away with that and it's going to lose control from it, where I have to, sort of elegantly disagree with that, because I believe the sweet spot in a conversation is, like a 70-30 ratio, where the customer's speaking 70% of the time and I'm only speaking for 30. Now, I know that sounds crazy when I'm the one presenting, but the more the customer provides, the more I can understand if I can help.
I think that is a good, ratio to have in general, because if you're talking only 30% of the time, there are those kind of people that when you get a conversation with, you never get a word in edgeways. And actually, if you spend the time listening, it's funny what can happen. If you do it in a social setting as well, and you end up just asking questions and listening, they walk away from that interaction going, geez, that's a lovely bloke. Or, I really enjoyed that. I feel really good. You didn't say anything. because people aren't used to it. People love the sound of their own voice. And I'm people who know me are probably thinking, yeah, that's you, Rob. Absolutely, I love talking.
Yeah.
We've got some people on Facebook here. Andy Milne, hey Andy, saying I find it easy. Mandy says I'm a question marker. David said yes. Sam, Sam, the book is Simon Sinek. Start with why. I have trouble, especially on the phone, to a complete stranger. Easy. Phone is difficult. I've lacked that extra rapport building to take my customer service to the next level. And Sandra, been on the end of one of my sales calls and said I'm amazing. I didn't have to read that one, did I?
You had to.
He's only said I'm amazing.
Yeah.
Well, but I guess the thing is that, can you make people feel good about the conversation that you're having would be something that I would feel is a trait that you would need to show when on the phone. I think most people would agree that when you're talking to somebody that you come away feeling good from the interaction, you'd want it again. So that would then open up a world of rapport, next level rapport. So perhaps as a practical at this stage, given that some people are asking some specific questions here around how to take that to the next level, perhaps just write these down, some examples of some big picture questions. So Alex, I'll come back to your question in a minute. The question is, how do you make someone feel good over the phone? Okay, so some some big picture question examples, things that Chris has already highlighted some already. So what do you like? What do you dislike? What's your ultimate objective? What are you looking to get out of this? What does perfect look like? I'll say them again. So what is your ultimate objective? What do you like? What do you dislike? What are you looking to get out of this? What does perfect look like? What's giving you the most headaches? What's been your biggest challenge?
Yeah.
As you move your relationship forwards, when dealing and looking with customer service, the deeper you go into those problems or those challenges or those answers, that's where the level of rapport is built. When, like Chris said, if you can listen, and Chris, I can't remember that earlier you said something about the 1, 2, 3 thing. What's that? Because you said that earlier, and I didn't know how to explain that in terms of like receiving information and then waiting, because you can actually miss things if you're over talking, as I'm doing.
And I nearly actually broke that as well. So normally what my rule of thumb is, if I ask a question, I ask the question because I generally want to know the answer. So I just allow the customer to answer, obviously, as well. But in my brain, again, as a practical, is having that 1, 2, 3 talk. There's a lot of time when Rob was just talking then that I was sort of rocking on my chair because I was going to try and cut him off. And I thought, no, because he's going to keep going and going and going. I allowed that pause. And what that does, it just doesn't break rapport, because again, to build likability, if I'm now talking away and I'm verbal diarrheaing and I'm talking, I could have something really important to say and Rob could cut me off there and then. And the more times that happens, the more time I'm just like, do you know what? If you really want to speak, you just speak, you know? So I think looking at having that 1, 2, 3 talk just allows that conversation to go smooth. And that may help you on the phone as well, Alex. Having that active listening, a lot of okay, makes sense, like you're still talking but you're not, but once the customer has finished the conversation, go, okay, perfect. And that 1, 2, 3 will go really, really quick, but I just find that it gives that gap and just allows the conversation to be quite smooth.
Yeah, no one likes to be talked or over talked. So as Chris just highlighted there, and it's a really good point, is that when you allow that little bit of extra time, the person just might be stopping in their train of thought and giving the extra second. They might carry on where you might have missed something, especially in closing. That's really important that you don't overtalk in the close. And the more that I feel like I'm being listened to, Alex, the more that I feel good. If I think that you genuinely care and you genuinely are interested in the things that I'm talking about, I'm gonna feel good. There are other ways. We're going to cover tonality, how to be able to create enthusiasm and do that throughout. If you're in the training, I believe you are going to the pace lead part of the training where you can raise enthusiasm levels. But people feel good when they talk about themselves, when they talk about common interests, or they feel like they've got a common ground with someone.
And one way to keep the sort of framework and guidance through that sort of process, if everybody on the session today, Facebook or Zoom, if everybody can get the chat ready as well. Rob, I want you to do this as well. Everyone ready? One word. Keep it reasonable. Let's try and keep this reasonable as well. But one word. What do you like? Put it in the chat. What do you like? People, hikes, surfing, rugby, beer, food, reading, food, ice cream, fun, family, football, family time. Do you see how that one particular fishing, racing cars, do you see how the one question with everybody inside this whole session has given me a different answer? I could now relate to Fernando and say fishing's something that I'm learning to go. Due to only been in the country a few years now, I've been here for 7 years. Where would you recommend in Australia to go fishing? I'm then going secondary and tertiary level questions to really build a natural level of rapport. Or I could go the other way and say, when you go fishing, is it something you do yourself or do you go with the family? Like, then I'm looking to build rapport on a social level. So we ain't got time to obviously go into Ford, but I just wanted to give that prime example there on the power behind a big picture question. It is so crucial within your sales process. You don't have to keep it specific to your product and service, but how you can get such a range of information, that has just proven that there in a few seconds, you know. So really having to think around the sort of questions you're asking that allows you the framework to control the call.
Also, with using, you know, the human mind, the brain, whatever, likes narrative. If we talk in narrative, people will understand and respond. Just on Facebook, who put it? Matthew Young put poker. I'm a big poker fan, so if I know that Matt likes that and I'm trying to use an analogy, then if I use that kind of poker terminology, for example, like going all in, or talk about depending on the type of poker that it is, if it's Texas Hold'em or whatever, then I know that I can build rapport and relationship on something by not even directly talking about it. It may have been a comment around about what did you get up to on the weekend, or what do you do? And he says, oh, I play poker. I might bank that information and then reference it later on in an analogy. And actually it's like, which I remember when I joined ISR, 4 or 5 years ago, Ryan spoke about he asked me what I was doing on the weekend, and we spoke on a Saturday, and he said about poker, and he said, oh, you'd love to have to come and have a game with Jack and the guys. Ryan necessarily didn't play poker at that time, or maybe he did, I can't remember, but just even knowing that little bit of information, I felt like I knew him well, and the fact that I could actually picture him and the guys sat around playing poker, which just made him a real person. And I think that intelligence gathering that we talk about as part of our negotiation ladder, for those of you who know, we've got building rapport and gathering intelligence either side of the 10 steps. We haven't got time to go into that today, but for those in the academy, jump back into it and just see that you're forever, be the gathering intelligence or building rapport, to not to use it, because using it's not the right word, but to maximize the information that you've received so that you can make the other person feel more comfortable. And if you know that you've got something in common with somebody else, Liam's put food, just in general, like, mate, we could have a chat about food all day, but obviously we don't want to get drawn into conversations around that. But just a little bit of information can help.
The likability, really.
Exactly, and likability is that key part. For those of you who want to jump back into Training Tuesdays from a few weeks ago, we did a whole session on likability. We just had a couple of questions here, Chris. We've got about 5-6 minutes left, mate, so I don't want these questions to go unanswered. I'll look on Facebook if you want to look on Zoom. Alison has asked, how can you allow the discussion to flow naturally if all online and not in verbal discussions? That's a real tough one in regards to if you're just, Alison, can you just put in there, are we talking like on a chat bot or someone's reached out on Messenger? Can you just clarify that for me with that question? perhaps, Chris, you want to, while she's replying, because there's a bit of a delay, there's about a 30-second delay. So any of the ones inside of, if
Yeah,
you...
we had Leanne. How do you get somebody, and I guess this is quite common, who's holding back their information as you try and ease out the answers? I think like what Rob said there, answer the question that you're about to ask. So if you're finding it difficult, you know, the old saying of getting blood out of a stone, sometimes it's hard, you know, you say, what do you like? And the customer says, why? You know, because they've not got that likability with you, where I'm sure if they're with their friends or family, they're going to provide that information. So I think if you can answer the question that you're about to ask, so, you know, I'm from Doncaster in the UK, where are you from? Anything that you're struggling to get information out, then provide your own information, because I guess it just gets a little bit socially weird if you share your information. Like Rob said, building reciprocity. If you're sharing your information and the customer doesn't give that back, we'd have to unpack that on an individual basis, but that's probably the best way to sort of answer.
I would also ask myself, why are they holding back?
Is it the tone of voice? Is it the type of questions we're asking? You know,
maybe we're just not asking them in the right tone. Maybe we're asking the wrong questions or the right questions in the. You know, if I said to Chris, "Oh mate, tell me how much you earn," and you go, "Well, hold on a minute. Well, that's a bit obtrusive." But I said what we usually call a justify. If I said just to gain an understanding of the ballpark in maybe what you've got set aside for personal development. Just as a rough idea, what sort of ballpark are you in for earning capacity at the moment, Chris?
And then if I say, yeah, I've got, you know, 5K at the moment, perfect. And are you very similar to many other people? You know, sort of put 5-10% of your annual earnings into personal development. Rob has got the answer of how much I earn without asking that question, if that sort of makes sense. So like Rob said, maybe looking at the particular questions we're asking could be quite powerful too.
And use that justification previously, just to gain a little bit of an understanding, just to understand your situation a bit better, to help me help you, then ask your question. You'll likely find that they might actually be, because if I don't know why you're asking me the question, I'm unlikely to answer it. Well, why do you need that information? But if I tell you why I need it, then you're probably more likely to answer. So hopefully that helps. Alison's come back, sorry, just to say, as in all online business and communicating this way. Really difficult when you're only using text, Alison, to write information, because there's no tone, there's no ability to gauge on it. So your language that you use is really important. I would definitely set the scene. If someone reaches out via Messenger, I would say, I'm going to ask a few questions to understand your situation so that I can help. And then do your best to personalize or humanize the connection. The less it seems like you're a chatbot monitor, you know, from I'm doing that. I mean, you know, maybe in another part of another different country or an external individual, the more that you can feel that there's a personal touch to it. So referencing something that you've done that day, or saying, hey, we've had a lot of inquiries, I'm doing my best to get through them all, or, you know, I'm only human, let me grab my coffee. I don't know, something to make it seem, again, that's coming back to break the mold. I think that might help in breaking down the barrier that potentially you're an individual who, you know, isn't a person, you know.
Or if there's a way maybe to get it off online to having an offline conversation, that sometimes can be quite powerful, because then you have an ability to, you know, connect on social media, even if the person doesn't want to be on a phone call or a Zoom call. Sending a voice message, like we've already covered, can be quite powerful too.
Yeah. And yeah, I think people are petrified at picking up the phone and having a conversation. I understand that, especially if they're reaching out for something. But without knowing the intricacies of the business, it's quite tough to. But hopefully that helps.
We've got Alex in there. Tonality is very powerful. Couldn't agree with you more. 9/10 of your communications through your tone and body language. We haven't done the individual tones yet, Alex. There's plenty of training inside the academy that you're a part of. I'd jump back in there, but maybe me and Rob will do a series on tonality. And Leanne's finding that from IT people. Hopefully there's not IT people in here that find that the wrong way. But maybe we could work on that, Leanne. If you want to reach out to myself or Rob directly, chris.blackburn@isrtraining.com.au or rob.hawkes@ISR. We'd love to assist you on that particular area. But Rob, we're 60 seconds up, mate.
Wow.
No, we need to start extending these sessions, I think. So
keep them wanting more.
what have we got coming up, Rob?
All right. So also, just before I wanted to highlight what Neil had said. Niall had said, well, I find when you've got an accent like me, that people tend to listen to the accent rather than what you're saying. A way around that as well is just getting people to write stuff down. Just simply grab a pen for me, just jot down and get them to summarize the key points. That way that they wouldn't have missed anything. So
gain control early, grab a pen, let me know when you've got one, or to be super transparent, please just pop something in the chat today to let you know that we're around. It's gaining control and it's creating interaction. So looking at ways to do that with your client is very, very powerful from the outset.
We're 5 o'clock, so time is up. But next week's session, we're going to be covering E of our BBETTS, BBETS acronym for building rapport professionally. And we're going to be talking effective questions and efficiency. So kind of 2 E's, but we'll roll them into one. Effective questions. So we've covered big picture, getting that big understanding, the framework for character, and an understanding of who they are and how we may be able to help, and the relevance of big picture. And that's what we covered this week. Next week, we're going to be looking at effective questions and then efficiency, or as some people like professionalism, but BPP TTS doesn't sound as good.
Yeah.
So
thinking what to do with your intelligence from your big picture questions. Next week, 4:30 on Tuesday, me and Rob are going to show you how to move forward to the next, part of the questioning phase as well.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks everybody on Facebook as well. So we've got Casey, Nick, Mandy, Alison, Anchor, Matthew. You guys have been awesome commenting in there. So really, that's Sam as well, and anyone that I've missed. Maya, I can't name you all. And again on Facebook as well. Thank you so much for your time. Next week, 4:30. Apology if you received 15 different email calendar requests for it. I'm trying to figure it out as we hire someone. If you know anyone who's good at admin, then we are hiring at the moment. So that's on this date. If you listen to this retrospectively, the 19th of May, hopefully we filled it by then. But
one date to save as well. This Thursday, 4 p.m. we have one of the investors, Mr. Steve Baxter, having a 45-minute session talking everything technology with Ryan Tuckwood. So if you can find 45 minutes aside, how much is it?
It's free,
live and complimentary.
What? That's crazy.
Live and complimentary.
No, we need to start charging for these sessions.
No, we don't. 4 o'clock Queensland time, Thursday. Tune in and listen to Miss Steve Baxter.
All right, awesome. All right, Chris, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, everybody. Have yourselves a fantastic rest of your week. We'll look forward to catching up with you guys, hopefully with Steve Baxter. If not, we'll see you all next Tuesday on Training Tuesdays. Have a fantastic rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe. Cheers, Chris.
Thank you. Stay safe.